Good afternoon to you, and welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time for the Week 14 receiver rankings. I just sneezed a bunch not too long ago, so if I sound a little stuffed up, I kind of am. Hopefully that will go away, but we need to keep going with the day, keep getting these rankings done, finished, edited, thumbnails edited out to you. So, in this video, I will not be ranking currently for my wide receivers, Amari Cooper and Christian Watson, neither one of them. A little note for Josh Palmer of the Los Angeles Chargers. His practice window was opened today, give him the 21-day practice window. So he could be back this week. Currently do have him in the rankings. He's just kind of parked where he ended up in my rankings. The complete rankings are up on the website. I will be going through my top 39 wide receivers, but you can see the rest of the rankings, some 90-plus receivers ranked, up on the website, www.theffforge.com, linked in the description, as well as up above me. You can see that. But as far as Josh Palmer goes, he would probably be in my top 40, probably would have made this window if we knew he was back and we trusted how healthy he was. Also, Thursday Night Football, I go live 1.5 to 2 hours prior to kickoff here on YouTube for any of your start-sit questions, and I also go live 3 hours prior to kickoff Sunday for any start-sit questions as well. Please drop a like. It helps a lot. That is always appreciated, and feel free to ask any comments that you may have, any questions that you may have in the comments. I am usually pretty darn good about getting a response out. Sometimes it might take a little while. YouTube has decided to not give me the little notification thing up at the top of the screen, not put a little alert there that I have notifications. So that's been kind of annoying, but at least I know that now. So I just regularly check. And as we go, you will be seeing my projections on the screen, but of course the order that I have them in are my rankings. Now let's quick recap how I did in Week 13 with my DFS buys, which you can get my DFS buys for Week 14 at the end of this video, and how I did with my loves and my fades last week. There are 3 of each for the wide receiver position. So, starting off with the DFS buys, at the bottom of the barrel, big tournament long shot. I thought A.T. Perry for $3,300 last week was worth taking a shot on. I did think that Chris Olave was going to be out for the game, so that probably wouldn't have been my suggestion had I expected Chris Olave to return, and I don't think A.T. Perry did much. I said that I'd be taking a shot on Jalen Waddle, and my contrarian play was Cooper Kupp. For some reason, I didn't record how they did. How did Jalen Waddle and Cooper Kupp do last week? Well, Cooper Kupp, he got a touchdown. It wasn't a great week. He probably wasn't quite worth the $7,800, but it was worth a shot there for a contrarian play. I doubt a lot of people played him. And Jalen Waddle at $7,600, that ended up being, I was going for that was kind of a contrarian play too. But it ended up being a Tyreek Hill game, and that should have been obvious given the opponent. We've been attacking the guys who go deep against Washington on other opposing offenses all season long, so of course Tyreek Hill was going to have a monster day. Now for my loves last week, gave you Deebo Samuel, Terry McLaurin, and Josh Downs. Got Deebo Samuel correct. He finished second on the week in half PPR scoring. Terry McLaurin laid a big fat goose egg. That was very disappointing. And Josh Downs was also disappointing. Finished 62nd on the week for wide receivers. For my fades, I gave you DeAndre Hopkins, Drake London, Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel finished 34th on the week. Probably right about where I would have had him. 34th. I wrote 34th, not 34th, so whatever that means. But that's somewhere around where I had him ranked. I don't know if you want to call that a good fade or not. Probably not. Drake London, however, was a good fade, finished 83rd on the week, and DeAndre Hopkins finished 13th on the week. So I missed on that one. Now let's get on to the Week 14 wide receiver rankings. And here is my first tier, the must-start wide receivers for Week 14. Starts off with, of course, Tyreek Hill, and at my wide receiver 1, followed by CeeDee Lamb. I was tempted to put him over Tyreek Hill. As you can see from the matchup gauge there, deep red color, that's good. Red is good, blue is bad, white is going to be neutral for each of these categories that are highlighted in those colors. And so, yeah, should be a big week for CeeDee Lamb. Then Amon St. Brown in at wide receiver 3, followed by Justin Jefferson, Keenan Allen, A.J. Brown, Stephon Diggs, Mike Evans, Mike Pittman Jr., and DJ Moore to wrap this tier up. That's going to bring us on to this second tier of wide receivers. At wide receiver 11, we have Brandon Ayuk, followed by Jamar Chase, Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf, Jalen Waddle, and Devontae Adams to wrap this tier up at wide receiver 16. A little bit about Jamar Chase here. If we take away the broken play last week, he would have went 10 for 73 yards, which obviously full PPR, that's still a fine day. 10 receptions is absolutely fantastic on top of the 73 yards, not too shabby. But especially when we consider looking at standard scoring, maybe we move Jamar Chase down a little bit. There are some concerns still for me with Jake Browning in at quarterback. I'm not going to say, I'm 100% sold that he's some sort of stud quarterback. But he did play very well, so we also have some confidence in that. And that's where he ends up being ranked here, just making the top 12. Very impressive. And just like last week, it is Jamar Chase. He does have the talent to have those big plays, one play for 70-something yards and a touchdown, and take 12 targets to Jamar Chase any day. Then DK Metcalf here is a love of the week for me here, going up against San Francisco, which is a good wide receiver matchup. And I'm not trying to bandwagon off of last week's big game. I think I would have been optimistic about DK Metcalf to some extent, regardless of how last week went. But you can see the matchup gauge really, really likes him here. It's a plus matchup. Lockett seems fairly washed. JSN still not going to get a full set of opportunities with Lockett there, and really hasn't done a whole lot on the season anyways. So I think DK Metcalf is your ticket if you're Seattle once again to try to beat San Francisco, and should get the targets for sure and hopefully capitalize on those yet again for you if you are playing him. Then for Waddle and Adams, you're just going to have to trust them, and they have solid matchups compared to the guys in the next tier, where this is just kind of my little bad matchup tier. I would not be playing these guys over these guys purely because of concerns for the matchups. So this is my wide receivers 17 through 20, just a little group of 4 guys in this tier, starting off with Chris Olave, followed by Puka Nacua, Devonta Smith, and Nico Collins. Out of this group, who do I think is the least likely one to bust? And that'd be Chris Olave going up against Carolina. Regardless of who his quarterback is, almost certainly going to be Jameis Winston, which definitely gives him a little bit of extra pop in his, to his abilities this week. A little higher ADOT, most likely, than you would normally see with Derek Carr. But I like it. It still, historically here on the season does provide you probably the lowest ceiling out of this group, but going to give you that best floor, the safest floor. Carolina doesn't scare me as a team who can shut down Chris Olave completely. That's not really a big concern for me. But ultimately, compared to where he is ranked via the ECR and whatnot, I do believe that I am lower on him, so I did end up giving him a fade on the week here. Then we've got Puka Nacua, and not much to talk about here, just, not a good matchup. Devonta Smith, the return of Dallas Goedert, could cool Devonta off quite a bit, and it's a tough matchup against Dallas, so I'm just concerned about those things, and I am expecting Goddard to return this week. Then Nico Collins in at wide receiver 20 here, and who do I think is the most likely to bust out of these 4? And it is Nico Collins going up against the Jets, by far the toughest wide receiver matchup that there is this season for wide receivers in terms of average fantasy points allowed to the position. So let's move on to my 4th tier here. And now we're getting into a larger tier where I'm going to talk about each of these guys. At wide receiver 21, we have Courtland Sutton. It's a fantastic matchup for him going up against the Los Angeles Chargers. And we saw in my quarterback video, Russell Wilson was a love of mine on the week. I expect Courtland Sutton to help him become a validify? What the heck word am I trying to think of? That decision to make him a love of the week. I think Courtland Sutton would be, most likely to be the receiver to help him get there. Then Rashee Rice I have in at wide receiver 22. And last week, I was a little bit conservative with my ranking on him. Didn't want to get too excited with a 1 week pop in the targets. But now we're at 2 weeks in a row now where we have seen him get over 9 targets, not too long out of their bye week. And so he already was kind of trustworthy with his floor, but now he's got a ceiling and his floor is all the more secure. So Rashee Rice going forward, looking like somebody that we can trust, looking like somebody who Mahomes trusts. So I'm excited about that. And in a matchup against Buffalo, there's as good of a chance as any that this game turns into a shootout. Very possible. And Rashee Rice, it looks like, should be the one who is going to help Kansas City be able to get into a type of shootout situation and potentially win against Buffalo. So that's what excites me about him and makes him a love of the week for me. Then we have DeAndre Hopkins in at wide receiver 23. The temperature gauge says it all here. This nice deep red going up against Miami. They're going to be throwing a lot, probably all game long. It's going to be hard for them to establish some sort of good rushing attack. So DeAndre Hopkins should see a fair amount of targets, get some opportunities, potentially get a touchdown. But, we're not overly confident in it. Miami's defense has been better as of late, getting some guys back. As of late, too. They have lost some guys, too, but last week they did well. So, there's hope for DeAndre Hopkins definitely this week. Then we have Garrett Wilson here at wide receiver 24, and I am expecting that it sounds like Zach Wilson is going to be the quarterback of the New York Jets yet again. As that should be the case, we have now seen the other options, and it's not so pretty on the other side. The grass is not greener on the other side of the fence, right? So EV wide receiver 22, that's equalized value, very much like average fantasy points per week, except it takes into consideration the consistency of the player, less susceptible to a big game really fluctuating or pushing up the average fantasy points per week. And so, Garrett Wilson on the season has been around here, and he was better with Zach Wilson, so that gives us some confidence going forward here, going up against Houston. I see some upside in that matchup. Not a fantastic matchup, but definitely one that provides some upside. And so, I'm confident in, as confident as one can be in tossing Garrett Wilson out there this week. Then at wide receiver 25, we've got Calvin Ridley, and with Christian Kirk out of the way, he is the man now in this Jacksonville offense. I suppose if CJ Beathard is playing, I ranked this as if Trevor Lawrence is coming back, and that's far from a guarantee. So this ranking will change on Saturday if it's not looking like Trevor Lawrence is coming back. But for the time being, I'm going to pretend like Trevor Lawrence is coming back. Calvin Ridley's going to see a lot of targets from a good quarterback who probably can't run out of the pocket. And additionally to that, another thing we're going to keep our eye on in terms of Calvin Ridley and his ranking is going to be if Denzel Ward is playing or not. If he misses another week and we get Trevor Lawrence, we might even want to get a little bit more bold on Calvin Ridley. Maybe not, but regardless, he should amass a solid target share going forward, and hopefully sooner than later that will be with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. At wide receiver 26, we've got Romeo Doubs, wide receiver 27, Jaden Reed, this Green Bay Packer duo back-to-back here. You can see the projections aren't too far off from one another. Jordan Love does tend to spread the ball around quite a bit. There's nothing about this matchup that really favors either of these wide receivers, and part of the reason for that is not only is the New York Giants kind of like an average matchup for some of the factors that I like to look at to see which wide receiver type on a team might be able to feast or famine kind of, given that matchup. It's pretty much an average matchup, and both of these receivers have pretty darn similar numbers when you look at them. So when we look at targets, basically Romeo Doubs is going to have the edge in all of the numbers. You look at targets, Romeo Doubs has roughly one more target than Jaden Reed does. You look at the ADOT, and his ADOT is roughly 0.3 yards greater than Jaden Reed's ADOT. They're just about the same. Look at the red zone percentage, target percentage in the red zone for them, target share in the red zone. And Romeo Doubs' target share is roughly 2% higher, not even quite, than Jaden Reed. So he likes both of them in the end zone, Jordan Love, that is. And when you look at the total touchdowns on the season, that does favor Romeo Doubs, but it's 7-6 in favor of Romeo Doubs. So very close there. As far as on the season so far, my EV rankings have Romeo Dobbs as the wide receiver 27 on the season and Jaden Reed as the wide receiver 29 on the season. So they've performed ultimately very similarly for you as far as consistency goes. So they could both have decent games. One of them could have a good game. Who knows exactly what will happen, but going up against the New York Giants here, it's a great matchup. I want them in my lineup, and I'm hoping I get the... hopefully they'll just both do well, right? Then at wide receiver 28, we've got Brandon Cooks, and it's an excellent matchup going up against Philadelphia. So that is exciting. My biggest concern for Brandon Cooks is that I don't know that Philadelphia can cover CeeDee Lamb, and so I don't know that Brandon Cooks really has a high chance of having some sort of huge game against Philadelphia in terms of like, oh, well, Philadelphia is going to be able to slow down CeeDee Lamb, and then Brandon Cooks can feast or famine on their CB2. Nothing like that, but still lots of upside against Philadelphia. So I'm loving Brandon Cooks this week with that potential, and I'm happy to get him in my lineup if if the rankings so dictate. Then at wide receiver 29, we have Zay Flowers, and the projection speaks for itself. The ceiling just really isn't that great. You look down here, he's had a couple of pop games this week, nothing amazing. Maybe there was one week that I'm not thinking of that was really, really good. But all in all, he's just kind of been quite consistent as an option for you to play. Usually doesn't kill you, but rarely wins you the week. The other thing about this matchup against the Los Angeles Rams is that they are fairly susceptible to the deep throw. That's not necessarily Zay Flowers' bread and butter. Not that he can take advantage of a team, but that's going to be more of your OBJ, some of the other guys on the roster as well. That's more in their bag. So I'm a little more optimistic matchup-wise for OBJ this week than I am for Zay Flowers specifically. Now let's move on to my fifth tier of guys. And now we're in the tough-to-trust tier here, starting at my wide receiver 30 with Cooper Kupp. And that's just what it is. These guys are tough to trust. Cooper Kupp, I will say, it probably could have just fallen into either tier here since he did have that touchdown last week and came through. But you can see from the projections, it hasn't been great this season. He is my EV wide receiver 42 on the season, and he's in the second worst wide receiver matchup that there is going up against Baltimore. So for me, it is a little bit tough to trust him. Then we get to Adam Thielen at wide receiver 31. Tough to trust, right? He hasn't been good for some time. The new offensive scheme coordinator, coaching staff hasn't made him any better, that's for sure. And in fact, Jonathan Mingo has been on the rise now, so we'll see if that trend continues. But at this point, you no longer need to say, well, Adam Thielen did so great earlier on in the season, and force him into your lineup. We're past that. Hopefully, you were wiser than I, and were already past that yourself if you were an Adam Thielen owner. Then at wide receiver 32, we have Jacoby Myers going up against Minnesota. Actually, I do have optimism here, but still tough to trust. Tyler Lockett, same thing. I have optimism going up against San Francisco. Maybe they do come up with a game plan against DK Metcalf and leave Tyler Lockett open, or just Tyler Lockett has another 2-touchdown type of game as they get closer to the end zone. But it's tough to trust Tyler Lockett to be able to take advantage of this good matchup and give you a really good week, a boom, as you can see from the lower end of the projections there, not very high. Then for Jordan Addison, tough to trust. I am slightly optimistic with the return of Justin Jefferson that might be able to help him going forward. Gabe Davis is a fade for me on this week going up against Kansas City, very tough matchup. In addition to that, Kansas City has a very low amount of average yards per completion against them. They don't really allow the deep ball. So that's Gabe Davis's bag of tricks right there. I expect them to be able to probably prevent Gabe from having a big game this week. And so, quite potentially bust potential on him. So, yeah, that's why he's a fade for me. Drake London going up against Tampa Bay. Optimistic about that. Good matchup. I might have to get him up ahead of Gabe Davis for my Saturday update. But, we just saw what happened last week. He is tough to trust, right? Then we've got Deontay Johnson, George Pickens going up against New England. Not like it's a terrible matchup here. Not a great matchup. And I really don't think that it's a big drop off here from Kenny Pickett to I just had the name. The ex-Chicago Bears quarterback, Baby Trubisky. That was what somebody who sat next to me at Lambeau Field always used to call him, Baby Trubisky, because they were Bears fans. And I always went to the Bears games. So, anyways, both of them a little bit tough to trust, but some signs of optimism. We're still willing to play them if the rankings so dictate compared to who we have available to play this week. And Josh Downs in at wide receiver 39, just barely getting into the bottom of this tier. He is a fade for me going up against Cincinnati. Maybe I didn't bring this up, but I do think that this matchup for Cincinnati, kind of like the Gabe Davis matchup, except for flip it, Cincinnati's a really good matchup for Michael Pittman Jr. and for Alec Pierce to maybe have another big week after last week. And so that leaves Josh Downs as kind of the odd man out. Cincinnati does allow a large amount of yards per completion to receivers. So I think that at least favors Josh Downs. But I'm still willing to play him at a certain point here. And there were a couple of guys who, via the ECR, would be in the top 39. They are not via my rankings. That's going to be Elijah Moore. And I think that there is a pretty good shot that DTR is going to be returning this week at quarterback, which would give me really no confidence in Elijah Moore. So let's just hold our horses on him. Don't set him in your lineup and forget about it. Let's check what happens on the Saturday update. If it is Joe Flacco in at quarterback for Elijah Moore, we'll get a little bit more bold on him than where I currently am. JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba. It is a good wide receiver matchup going up against San Francisco, but look, he is the wide receiver 47 on the season via my equalized value projection rankings, not projections. He is projected in my projections as the wide receiver 55 this week. He has been overranked all season long via the ECR. People really, really want him to have a great season, and they keep ranking him as if he is having a great season, and it just hasn't been like that. It's rarely hurt me to not have him ranked highly, to have him lower than the ECR. So I'm going to continue that and not just push JSN up because we're all excited about his potential in that offense. So yeah, there we go. That is it for the Week 14 wide receiver rankings, top 39. Once again, the entire rankings are up on the website. Thank you very, very much. Please comment, like, and subscribe if you made it this far. Peace out.